So we're going to start off today with subpart A, the general definition, and it promotes workplace safety and health by establishing requirements relating to personal workplace activities and conditions and equipment on the outer continental shelf, also known as the OCS. So the second slide is duties of lessees, permittees, and persons responsible for actual operation. Part A. Each holder of a lease or permit under the Act shall ensure that all places of employment within the lease area or within the area covered by the OCS permit are maintained and run in compliance with the regulations set forth. And also, Part B, it says basically the people that in charge, operators, owners, contractors, subcontractors, need to make sure that everything's being run with regulations and that it is free of any recognized hazards. Third slide is the report of unsafe working conditions. Any person may report a possible violation and they must report it to their officer in charge. And after the officer in charge is made aware, he will conduct the investigation, and if actions need to be taken upon the operator of the deficiency or any other hazards, well, he'll initiate that conversation with them and get the problem fixed. Also, that the reporter is to remain anonymous unless he gives permission, or he or she gives permission to use their name or ID. We move on to subpart B, which is the personal protective equipment, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's concerning just personal protection on the offshore facilities. Use of equipment is first. So this slide's pretty simple as far as it's just use the necessary equipment that needs to be used on the facility, making sure that it's used and also that it is used properly, and that they just are aware of what needs to be worn at that specific facility, because it is different for different facilities. We move on to eye and face protection. It's personnel engaged in observing things such as welding, grinding, machining, chipping, handling of hazardous materials. They need to wear the necessary eye and face protection. It needs to be maintained and also must be marked with the information that's required. Next, we have head protection. So this is going to be used in places where you have hazards of falling objects or contact with electrical conductors, so you need to wear head protection. And it also must meet specifications, and it must be marked with the information as well. Next up, we got foot protection. So in any area or activity in which there's a possibility for foot injury, you're going to need to wear boots or something that protects your feet, steel toe boots, something like that, that are specified by those specific working conditions. Next, we have protective clothing. So personnel in areas with flying particles, molten metal, radiant energy, heavy dust, or hazardous materials. You see the guy here wearing, I think he's power washing, and he's going to be wearing the necessary protective equipment in order to protect him from things shooting up at him and getting in his skin that don't need to be there. Next, we have respiratory protection. So this is going to be used in any area where the atmosphere is deemed not suitable to breathe. So they're going to have the necessary respiratory aid, and the person that's entering that specific atmosphere must also follow procedures and be trained properly on how to use the equipment, and the equipment must be approved and maintained properly. Next up, we got safety belts. So this is going to be in case if there's a hazard of falling more than 10 or more feet, they must wear like a safety belt or a harness that's going to keep them locked into the structure. A lanyard, a lifeline, drop line, or fixed anchorage that meets the requirements set forth. Next up, we got personal flotation device. So a personal flotation device is going to be things like a life jacket or a life preserver. You're going to use this in instances in which if you were to fall, that you would likely fall into water. This is just going to protect people from drowning and things such as that. Next up, we got eye wash equipment. So if we're in an area that may immediately need some protective eye wash, near it says drill floors, mud rooms, and other areas where there's a reasonable probability for eye injury. So you're going to use like portable or fixed eye wash stations, things like that, to protect your eyes. We move into subpart C now, general workplace conditions, and this subpart prescribes requirements relating to general working conditions on OCS facilities. So first up, we're going to move into housekeeping. Pretty self-explanatory. So what this is going to do is just making sure that all ramps, stairways, other walkways are kept clear of tools, materials, equipment not in use, and that they are properly cleaned. If say oil or some other material gets onto the stairwell or something like that, making sure that it's cleaned off timely and to prevent tripping or slipping hazards. Next up, we have guarding of deck openings. So this is going to be holes, potholes, things like that, in like ships or offshore facilities that that when not being worked on, they need to be covered so that it prevents people from falling in, hurting their feet, their legs. You don't want them passing through. If there's a big hole, you don't want them falling into it. So it's just making sure that that's covered while it's not being worked on. Next up, we have lockout and tagout. So lockout is basically making sure that there's this equipment piece or device that prevents the activation of equipment. So basically make sure that it's turned off while they're working on it, and it's ensured to make sure that it stays off unless it's necessary for the work that's being performed on it. And then you have tag out, and they kind of go hand in hand because tag out is basically they just put this notification on the turned off object, and it's just letting people know that they're not allowed to turn it on or touch or mess with it unless the work's done, and it must have proper approval before being removed from it. So this pretty much sums up subparts A through C. And it's 33 CFR 142 and all the things that go along with that. Thank you.